We put together this lecture series to speak about the beauty of the Catholic Church. For so many men, it's been represented in the last 50 or 60 years by a very ugly and ingenuous mass. A hierarchy which is more concerned with the things of the world than it could ever be concerned with the things of God. With a redefinition not only of the faith, but of everything that comes from the faith, including the priesthood, marriage, etc. So in this series, we want to remind you again, to bring back, maybe for the first time, what is the Catholic Church and how beautiful it is, and how beautiful our lives are when they're lived within her. Now, we have recently written a letter entitled An Open Letter to Men of Goodwill, and this letter was to be a positive letter about the beauty of the church, coming from 3 points. These 3 points, or what we call actions, are connected to and associated with the hierarchy in the Catholic Church. That hierarchy is not the Pope, the bishops, and the priests. That is a part of it. But the hierarchy is the divine throne of Jesus Christ, the King, the throne of Our Lady, the Queen, in which the Church is seated, and the throne of St. Peter and all of the apostles, which are the princes of the Church. From this last throne, that of St. Peter and the apostles, it is made visible here on earth through the office of the Supreme Pontiff, the office of the bishop, and the office of the priest. But they are not the source of that authority, of that hierarchy. They are simply the means by which that hierarchy is lived here on earth. In other words, nothing comes from the office of the Supreme Pontiff, but it comes through him. Nothing comes from the office of a bishop, but it comes through him, and the same with the priests. So let's, again, look at the church and its beauty in the light of the hierarchy, and not from the point of view that has been taught to us as being Catholic. It is not. Now, the first thing that we have to make sure is very clear in our minds is that nothing exists outside of God. Nothing visible or invisible. Nothing continues to exist outside of God. Nothing visible or invisible. If we keep this principle in mind, this first of all of the foundations, it will help us not to get confused when men start to put them in their own power in the place of God. So when Jesus Christ proclaimed with absolute truth that a good tree cannot bear evil fruit, and an evil tree cannot bear good fruit, you will know them by their fruits. When he said this, we are to understand it within the context of absolute truth. That is, every word here means exactly what God created it to mean, not only in its visible form, but in its invisible meaning. We must first submit ourselves to this hierarchy. We must first be obedient to this truth before we can go on and understand what is meant by these words. When our Lord says a good tree cannot bear evil fruit, he means a good tree cannot bear evil fruit. You will know them by their fruits. If the fruit is evil, the tree is evil. That is, the source is evil. The fruit is just the final product. It begins with the seed, which is planted and nourished and grows and sprouts. It puts forth a trunk and then branches, and the branches put forth leaves, and the leaves flowers, and the flowers die and fall to the ground, and then the fruit. Our Lord means us to understand all of this when making a judgment about who is good and who is evil. For we are all a product of one or the other. There is much talk about the evil actions of bishops and their corruption in the Novus Ordo Church, but little talk about the source of that corruption, an evil tree from which they were produced. This is a point of frustration. This letter has been sent to every traditional congregation, every priest we know and have contact with, and yet there's been no response back. How could one not respond back to a situation that is taking place today, especially when the answer has been to speak about the corrupt fruit? In other words, to look at the symptom, but to refuse to look at the source. They don't want to look at the source. They simply want to try to destroy the bishops and replace them with other bishops who will be connected to this source, which is an evil source, because it was this source that produced those bishops. It's not as if they were some, every once in a while you'll find a corrupt priest somewhere. I remind you, these men were promoted through the system to be bishops, cardinals, and even popes through that system. It is not just a few corrupt persons. It is a system that produces over and over again corrupt fruit. And that is the conversation that we need to have. We need to speak about how to solve this problem at that level. We asked in the letter, how is it that so many intelligent and accomplished men have proposed that we fertilize and prune this tree, thus restoring it back to health? What? So that it can produce more corrupt fruit? God forbid. Why not instead cut this tree down and focus together on strengthening the good tree, so that it will bear more and more good fruit? These men seem to be afraid of trusting in God and His church. They seem to be afraid to give their power and control over to the hierarchy, which is that of heaven. They want to maintain, like the Pharisees of old, their power here on earth. And they're using good priests to do their work, because these men have been blinded by their false teachings to believe that what they are doing is serving God and His holy church, and in fact they are only serving the corruption of these men who they are now calling out and fighting against. This can produce no good fruit. It will only strengthen the production of more and more corruption. By this letter, we intend to show the absolute beauty of the Catholic Church in contrast to the vile ugliness of the modernist socialist church. And that is what it is. It is a modernist socialist church. You will know them by their fruits. Now, do not get us wrong. It is not a hatred for them or their system, that motivates us to stand here before you today. It is a love for God and His church. We understand the attacks that will come against us. We understand that if men begin to hear the truth and begin to turn their lives over to it, that we will most likely be personally destroyed. That's how they work. That's how a socialist regime works. But we are willing to be the fertilizer underneath the good tree that is used and absorbed so that the fruit can be borne in greater measure. And that fruit, as it always will be from this tree, will be good. But it will produce more good fruit. If it sounds to the modern ear that we are at times too antagonistic, it is only because so many churchmen have downplayed the grave destruction that has been wrought upon souls by this evil. So as you hear this letter and read it, you can read it at www.restoretradition.org. We challenge you to stop after each point and ask yourselves, is this particular statement true? Get out of the habit of just reading something over. Listen to it. Listen to what is being said and ask yourself, is this true? And if it is, then continue on. If it's not, then don't waste your time. Go to the next statement and ask the same question and so forth. When you come to the conclusion of the letter, which is harsh, remember your answers. For a conclusion to be true, all of the premises must be true. And please, dear faithful, dear priests, dear bishops, do not run away from the truth. It and it alone will set you free.